It is 1933, and a group of native Alaskans have boarded an abandoned cargo ship found in the ice. They have come on board this sad derelict to search for any supplies that might be on board, or any cargo or fur still housed in her hold. She is still silent and dead. A note left behind by trappers from the year before says they have claimed the ship for themselves, but they are now nowhere to be seen. Now these new visitors sit and listen to the eerie wail of the wind against the hull, and the groan and cracks of the ship as she shifts in the ice in a scene more frightening than any legend of monsters or any horror film, because they are now in the grasp of the monster. She is not dead, and finally, after 10 days, releases her captives who, like the trappers who boarded her before and left the note, flee, never to board her again or try to steal anything she still houses within her hold. Soon after, she vanishes, and they do not see her again. For the next 30 years, this same ship, the SS Baychimo, would be sighted drifting in the Arctic Ocean, looking untouched by time or the harsh conditions. Some stories even claim that the ship had a life of its own. Smoke would rise from her stack, and at night, a single porthole would be illuminated. There were many attempts to catch and board her, but all failed, and the ship always seemingly slipped away. But how did this iron freighter come to be abandoned in the ice and then drift in it for decades? This is the incredible story of the ghost ship, the SS Baychimo. The Baychimo was 230 feet long. She was launched in 1914, weighed 1,322 gross registered tons, and was a steel-hulled cargo ship. She had a triple expansion steam engine that could propel her forward through the water at 12 miles per hour or 10 knots. After World War I, she was one of the many vessels owned by Germany that were given out as war reparations. She was acquired by the Hudson's Bay Company and given her new name Baychimo. The ship's new mission was to transport furs and other trade goods along the hazardous Canadian Arctic coast and serve as a trade vessel with the Inuit people. This area was extremely hazardous for ships, but the Baychimo had a reinforced steel hull and was able to brave the treacherous waves and ice fields of the region. Here, the ice could suddenly close in and trap vessels for months or even years. Such a fate befell the Franklin expedition in the 1840s. In 1931, the Baychimo left for the harsh waters of the Northwest Passage on what should have been a typical voyage. She was retrieving valuable furs, and then she would be bound for Vancouver, Canada. Her crew consisted of 37 seasoned sailors, led by Captain Cornwell. All the men were all acquainted with the hazards of the Arctic, but on October 1st, the Baychimo became trapped in an unexpected thick ice pack and a blinding blizzard off the northern coast of Alaska. The crew worked to free her for days before Captain Cornwall gave the order to abandon the ship due to the severe blizzard. They traveled over half a mile to the town of Barrow, and there they sheltered for 2 days, hoping to wait out the freeze until a thaw, which would allow them to retrieve the ship. They did make regular returns and attempt this, but they had no luck in getting her free. On October 15th, the company sent a small plane to retrieve 22 members of the crew, leaving 15 behind for the salvage efforts. Another blizzard struck on November 24th, and afterwards, when they returned to the ship, she was gone. This time, the remaining crew mournfully believed that she was lost, broken up, crushed, and sunk. But then they received word from an Inuit seal hunter. He had spotted the ship 45 miles away, trapped in the ice once again. The crew tracked the ship down after she gave them the slip. The search revealed that the Baychimo was still afloat, and they had hopes of salvaging her, but these were soon dashed. The ice closed around her again, and the crew decided that she would not survive. So they unloaded the most valuable items, such as the more valuable furs, from her hold, and a plane was sent again by the company to retrieve the rest of the crew, and they were flown back to Vancouver. Everyone believed that the ship was lost after she was abandoned, and it would only be a matter of time before the ice claimed her forever. But the Baychimo proved more hardy than anyone expected. She would spend the next 40 or so years sailing through the Arctic ice, seen many times, and it became known as a local ghost ship. Trappers, hunters, sailors all reported seeing her, and their stories make it sound like the Baychimo took on a life of her own. She seemed to always move to avoid people trying to salvage her. In 1932, trappers boarded her and left a note behind claiming the ship for themselves, but they never returned. In 1933, that group of native Alaskans boarded her and were trapped for 10 days. Later that year, the crew of the schooner Trader spotted her, but the next day the ship was gone, last seen hurrying north in her private ice pan. Before she vanished, though, they saw her several times on the horizon, looking like she was following them. Finally, though, she seemed to turn north and vanish. Some objects were salvaged from her around this time as well, and in late summer of that year, the Hudson's Bay Company heard that she was still afloat and were interested in a salvage effort, but dropped the idea once they heard that she was too far sea to salvage. In 1934, she was boarded by curious explorers from another schooner, but they did not attempt to salvage her. In 1935, she was seen off the northwest coast of Alaska. In 1939, she was boarded by a Captain Polson who wished to salvage her, but the ice once again crept in and she was abandoned. As far as we know, this was the last time anyone ever boarded the Baychimo. After 1939, each time she was seen, she'd almost appeared to avoid others trying to board her. It was like she was alive and wandering like a ghost amid the ice floes. She was sighted several times by patrols during World War II, but never again attempted to be salvaged. Sightings became rarer and rarer after the war. In March of 1962, years after she was last seen, she was again seen drifting offshore in the Beaufort Sea by a group of Inuit. The fact that she was out there stunned many. It had been years since she had been last seen. One comment that I saw on a YouTube video about her, I really liked, said something on the lines of, imagine being the original captain all those years later and hearing that she was still out there, like she was looking for her crew. Despite all these years in the ice, the ship was still afloat and, according to witnesses, looked to be in near perfect condition, and many stories said that this cursed ship was now piloted by an always unseen crew. In 1969, over 30 years after being abandoned, the Baychimo was seen again in the Beaufort Sea between Point Barrow and Icy Cape, stuck in pack ice, low in the water, but afloat and looking untouched by time. The crew who saw her made an attempt to salvage her, but again the ice prevented it and the ship slipped away. She was never seen again. Whatever her ultimate fate was is unknown. If she is sunk, trapped in ice, or still floating out there are all seen as possibilities. In 2006, a search was undertaken to look for her, but nothing was found. Perhaps one day she will be found, be it as a wreck on the bottom of the ocean, or still afloat and defiant, as she had been all those decades ago. What do you think befell the ship? Is she a wreck somewhere, or is she still out there? I'd love to know. Tell me what you think in a comment.